And you just
So
mentioned training. What is that? I guess what does training mean from a DR perspective? Especially if, for something like DR, we like to talk about trying to automate as much of that work as possible just because it kind of takes you out of you can't run the risk of forgetting to do a backup if it's been automated, whatever your schedule might be. But what does
mhm.
training mean within the DR perspective?
Yeah, so training on the technology is going to be important, right? So
Hmm.
understanding how it works, understanding how to leverage the different tools. We're here to help manage that for you, but a lot of customers also want to have a part in that process.
Hmm.
So we're gonna start by teaching them all about rubric and the best practices. Now, when it comes to the DR piece, and I'm going to skip through some slides here because that's a great question. When it comes to the DR piece, it's really walking through the DR testing piece. I would call that part of the training because the very
Hmm.
first time you do a DR test, we call it a smoke test. And it's to walk through and make sure all the parts and pieces are working and the customer understands how it's going to work, what's going to happen before it happens. So we create custom run books and boot order scripting for the customer. So we work together to figure out what servers are going to come up in the correct order, and we keep a log of it. So when disaster strikes, the meteor hits, customers driving 3 towns over to get an internet connection, we've already kicked off that DR process. The customer is going to have a dedicated firewall instance. We can do virtual. If they want a physical, we can rack it in our data center. So if you're a Baraki or Palo Alto shop, whatever the case may be, we can operationalize it. You can put your own in our data center. But it's really the DR tests. So there's 2 DR tests per year is what we're kind of training them up on, and they're learning about and making sure that they can do the smoke test, again being the most important, that first one. um, so that's where they're logging into their environments. They're making sure that the connectivity is in place. The networking is the secret sauce. Your
Hmm.
customers were all once pointed to point A, now they need to put point to point B. Making sure that's working, making sure our teams are communicating any changes in the environment. So we do quarterly automated recovery configuration reviews to make sure that we can connect and things are working. If not, we'll proactively reach out to the customer and talk about any changes that might have taken place. So when you talk about training for DR, I think that's the most essential piece is going through the testing piece.
Gotcha. And then, of course, feeds into kind of having your disaster recovery plan. We talk a lot about having an incident response team, especially when we look at, I guess, those that are targeted the most that we work with, which would be K-12s. Who on your team is going to manage what. We actually had a school that we spoke to at a conference, and their deputy was kind of working as their CIO, and their CIO, I think, might have come from curriculum and ended up coming into IT. And the CIO wasn't really understanding the criticality of certain resources compared to, say, like the school LMS or something like that. And the deputy had to try to educate the CIO on why certain things needed to be recovered in a certain order. So when you're talking about, testing and the simulations and being able to show what's coming up, like which servers are coming up, all of that stuff, I'm thinking back to different conversations I've had, different situations that we've been a part of. And it's so critical to have priority one, priority two, priority three, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, absolutely. And through that planning process, you're also figuring out, like you mentioned, what's the most critical and what comes up first. So another thing that we can provide is some DR resources, so VPU, RAM, and disk that's
Hmm.
available, so you can have some always on VMs. So if you wanted a passive instance of Active Directory up and ready to go, already pre-built, then we can have that for the customer. So they get a 4x32 bundle as part of the package. If they
Hmm.
want to have more reserved resources, that's not a problem. We can build out as much as they need. But the real secret to the sauce when it comes to DR is the fact that they're not paying for any of that vCPU, RAM, or disk for the remainder of their environment. You only pay for it when there's an actual disaster. Those are called on-demand resources. And those
Mhm.
are priced out monthly, but billed and metered hourly. So the rest of the environment, you're saving money because you're not having to build this out. You're saving money because you don't have to have a second data center that you purchased with more infrastructure and more people. You're leveraging our second site, you're leveraging our clean room, and you're leveraging the resources that we have available for when you need it.